I'd like to acknowledge the Widjabawaba people, the native title holders, and give thanks for being able to live here and write on their country. I have 3 poems. Everlasting golden thread. Journeys of truth for my granddaughters. 2 stories to be told. 2 great-grandmothers from opposite sides of the globe. Rope, coils and uncoils. Ladders, spiral, rungs, splice, daughters of daughters, destinies, twisted and twined into this everlasting golden thread. Knots tighten. Whispers hush, secrets revel and unravel. Against their will, 2 young girls held in stinking hulls of marauding English ships. From grandmothers past to granddaughters and beyond, there exists this golden thread of love, truth and justice. So no blame, no guilt, no cloak of shame, one a convict and the other a slave. While tight-lipped sipped tea and nibbled scones or drunk rum by the barrel, telling and retelling a wild colonial tale, I tell you tales of truth, stories untold. This is the telling, the told, stolen girls thrust onto stolen shores. The unknown becomes known. These are tales that have floated around, waiting to be told, and the story time is now. Reckoning tales, cautionary tales, survival tales. My story, our story, bound together in this everlasting golden thread. Dog-whistling women through Australia's colonial history and the origins of the damned whore. My great-grandmother's story. It's trendy to find you've got convict ancestry, she said. I was going to say not sure I agreed, but I didn't. Travelling for truth amongst time's restless souls. Interlockers beware, I declare a vested interest, ensuring this tale gets told. It's the 1840s. Ireland is on its knees, plundered under English rule. Thousands of Irish girls imprisoned for poverty and starvation. At the same time, it marks 50 years of the English colonisation and yet to be atoned Australian invasion. This story colors deny obscure whistling the whistler's tune. But those first 50 years, the worst of colonial men dominated an angry breed of convict man, and they planted a vengeful seed, the true blue Aussie bloke. Sentenced to a one-way ticket on a convict horse ship, those Irish girls now called Mary Smith, the damned Irish convict whore. Oppression cleaved generations of female destiny. The moment Mary's foot touched shore, young girls fed to hungry wolves, the roughest hands, the toughest colonial outpost. 7 years of the hardest labour, Tasmania, Australia. Women born and bred as whores, never a lover, never a wife, a woman's value of diminished returns, calculated in the most sexist terms. Those first 50 years wrote the lyrics for the dog-whistling tune of women are just damned whores. Stained lies spun into thread and tattered around the tablecloth edge. No name under palm, under oath in the family Bible, rutting a whore. Celibate priests and men of all persuasion, blaming her a sinner. Women forever be damned. Women still pimped, commodified, commercialised, inequality, long-term poverty, abuse and rape. The weekly killings of women by men and barely a passing mention. Those first 50 years must have shaped Australian masculinity, encoded to abuse and dominate, forcing so many women to dance to the dog-whistling tune of the quintessential Aussie bloke. My grandchildren identify as Aboriginal, Torres Strait and South Sea Islander. This is another part of their untold story. Ben Boyd, Australia's first blackbirder. The South Coast harbour town still bears his name. Google him and it says, the grand entrepreneur. A holiday park still bears his name. and until recently a national park named in his honour. Ben Boyd, not a merry old soul, son of a Scottish slaver, he hoisted sail on blood-stained tide, and his tale is one of cruelty and death, seeping into the Australian soil and colonial psyche. For 7 years, from 1840 Sydney to Boyd Town, his south coast harbour town, sporran stuffed with land titles and shipping routes, he siphoned his Ponzi coin, and unheeded by his own great expectations, he rode the wave of colonial greed, a brutal bastard coloniser. Atrocities reported but left unhindered on the people of you and country. But they say the lights never burned from Boyd Town Lighthouse, and lovers never danced his haunted homes. His hearth went cold on his smoke and mirror finance, his whaling business waned, and his harvests were never sold. So clinging to his wretched life, he armed his fleet with cannons, muskets, shackles and cages below, and he boasted, "Free Black Island labour!" He was going to import Vanuatu and New Caledonia, his first hunting ground. Squatters and landowners, spines aligned, they too wanted free or cheap labour. Black blood spilt for Christians and reformists, not a moral matter. True to form, editors of the Australian whistled racist hymns and sang songs of Boyd's praises. But then the legislators turned the tide, deciding Boyd's coin no longer legal tender. So named tarred with feather, he pulled up anchor and sailed his ass away with a jolly good riddance, killed by island spear soon after. In his wake, South Sea Islanders, human chattels he had imported, left naked, dying from starvation and exposure to cold. Their bones of truth are strewn along all state highways, forgotten. Reprieve for the island nations was temporary, and blackbirding was normalised in Queensland and New South Wales in 1860. The Australian slave trade ended in 1910. Such recent historical amnesia. 62,000 South Sea Islander men, women and children were enslaved. Then their bodies discarded in cane fields from Cape York to round here on the Bunjalung Nation. These days, pastoralists and producers import government-sanctioned cheap labour from the same South Sea Islands. What does it say about us white fellas and the value of a person according to the colour of their skin? Don't get me started on the gut-wrenching, never closing of the gap. Something has to change. Last year, my middle granddaughter, who was 6, was racially abused and terrorised on the Byron School bus by a 12-year-old white boy. We can do so much better, Australia. Their voice, their stories, their rights, their black lives matter.